Hello, everyone. So today let's talk about animism. So animism is the attribution of a soul to plants, inanimate objects, and natural phenomena. That's the first definition. 2, the belief in a supernatural power that organizes and animates the material universe. So there's some interesting little tidbits of historical information about animism and it's kind of how it pops up that have always stuck out to me. One of them for me is how the Roman legions back in classical Rome, republic or empire, once a battle was carried out, once a battle was won, they wouldn't do this usually if a battle was lost because either they wouldn't be there or they didn't have the opportunity, they would have fled, or they were just completely defeated or mainly wiped out. But if a Roman legion won, they didn't always do this, but a lot of time they did. They would gather the armor and weapons of the defeated enemy and kind of make a statue out of it. So they'd put the armor together to where it formed a body, and they would put weapons against it, either to look like it could have been holding the weapons if it had arms, or the weapons would be laid at on the ground, and the helmet was usually on top. It's meant to form what basically looks like a human body made out of armor and weapons and things like that. And the Romans would either give it offerings or kind of worship it. So this kind of formed the spirit of battle. It was an attribution of their victory in that battle, to the spirit of that particular battle. So this wasn't a spirit that existed before. This is a spirit they were offering to and kind of making at the same time. So the armor and the weapons were both kind of the offering and the body of this spirit of that battle. This is animism in its most interesting. Well, it's very interesting in a number of instances, but there's not a whole lot of people to talk about how armies did this. The Romans weren't the only ones to do this, but the idea of a spirit of a battle, of granting them victory, and then them offering to that spirit of that particular battle by forming basically these totems in a way is very fascinating to me. Another fascinating thing about battles in the ancient world, and later on as well, but in the ancient world, a lot of the time, most people don't even know this now. When you have many thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of troops fighting and dying, there's a lot of perspiration that is kind of let off into the air. There's a lot of moisture, whether it be evaporating blood, evaporating sweat, if somebody pees themselves, all kinds of other fluids throws up, evaporating. And if you have enough people doing this and enough evaporation, it can actually form clouds and it can actually start to rain. In history, you hear these certain times when it didn't look like it was going to rain, then it starts raining after a while, during the battle or after. A lot of the time, it seems very magical because it's after. And it doesn't mean that it's not magical because it's the evaporation then rain clouds. And then that's another one of my points that I'm trying to get to, that we'll see a little bit later down the line. So another instance of animism that I don't know the terms for, because originally, there's different terms for for demon in Japanese. Oni is like an ogre, some kind of like orc, you can call it a demon. Kishin is another one. There's a few other ones, and I'm not good at linguistics whatsoever, but in Japan and traditional folklore and traditions, everything kind of has a spirit. So we're talking about Shintoism mainly. Buddhism, it's interesting how Shintoism and Buddhism kind of mixed and melded and created its own thing, especially when it transfers into Zen Buddhism, which isn't a direct transfer, but anyway. So everything basically has a spirit. So in ancient Japan, and I imagine somewhere now still, there'd be even a spirit of the latrine. And when you go to the latrine, you might make an offering of water or an offering of some kind of prayer to that spirit to appease it so that it can keep on performing its function. mainly making sure the waste it goes where it needs to go. Make sure you're not happened upon by trouble or harm while you're there, and it's an acknowledgement of a necessary function and the need of even something like a latrine, like a toilet, that sometimes these spirits be worshipped for generations. It wouldn't just be like, one guy's makes up a spirit and then it's worship. No, it can happen for generations in this one household. Also, and when I say ancient Japan, I mean pre-modern era. So anything before that, I know I'm using the term ancient incorrectly. I think around the time of imperialization, a lot of these traditions were dying. I'm not sure if they picked up again, but little do people know that Christianity was actually really big in Japan for a long time, even during the time when they were invading Korea, way back when gunpowder was just kind of a thing. But anyway, so the latrine would have a spirit. The house would also have a house demon. That once again, I don't know the exact Japanese term for it. But this house demon would make sure that the house was, you'd have maybe a little shrine. This later transferred into Buddhism by having, kind of a house Buddha and having a Buddhist, either a tapestry or a statue that you would offer to. But before that, and kind of during it, were these house demons. Now, if you made little offerings to them, their function was to protect the home, make sure it didn't burn down, make sure that to alert you if there's any burglars or anything like that, and to create kind of a protective barrier. The spirit was supposed to do that. I think it did as well. I actually believe that all these things are completely valid. Another form of animism is interesting in Greece, particularly around Athens, but throughout classical Greece. There'd be different kinds of Zeuses that you would offer to based on the function of a particular piece of your property or house. So, for instance, there'd be you'd either say prayer of acknowledgement or offer a little piece of a coin or a piece of bread. Usually it'd be more like a word offering. At the fence, when you reach the fence of your house, or boundary marker, you might make a little offering to Zeus Erkios, something like that. I'm butchering that quite a bit because it's an OI, I believe, instead of an IO. Erkois. I'm gonna go with that, even though I'm butchering it. So a particular form of Zeus, based on that power that Zeus has of protecting boundaries, you'd reach out to Zeus in that through that particular spirit for your particular property. So every property would have their own kind of Zeus Erkois, something like that. And they would all be individual different ones. But because Zeus had that power of boundaries, protecting travelers, making sure no harm came when somebody was traveling, going through places, Hermes kind of did something similar. Because of that, you would both be worshiping Zeus through that spirit, but that spirit would also be in and of itself, or that kind of God would be in and of itself. Spirit might not be the right term in this circumstance. So that leads me to the idea of segmentation of power. So the reason why, well, before we go into that, another interesting thing about ancient Greece is that there's a lot of evidence of these mounds of rocks that before there were, archaeologically speaking, before there were statues of gods, there were these piles of rocks to mark, either like a road intersection or to mark periodically along a path before, completely paved roads and things like that, or even rocky roads that were developed later. And it was considered good luck to add to these rock mound piles or pour something odd in offering, but it'd be very bad to remove the rocks, and you might anger that spirit of that road, that crossroads, that boundary, and you might be misled along your path. You might trip, something like that. So let's go to the idea I was talking about, segmentation of powers. So a lot of people who are monotheistic and just like push the one God idea. They can't really understand the idea of different gods, of why you would think that there's different gods, and that there's not just one. Why do you believe in different spirits and things like that? To so much to the extent that you might call all these other things that you're believing in is evil, and only the one God is right to believe in, and everything else is just an illusion, a trick of something that's trying to bring you away from God. So, um, the closeness that pagans have to nature is directly tied to this idea of segmentation of, it's not called segmentation, I'm just using that, of the Godhead, God with big G. So the pagans in Greece and in Rome, it's a really interesting story about how kind of getting off track here, but one of the arguments against the Christians when they're becoming a thing, but that Rome wasn't Christian yet, was that they actually believed in multiple gods because they believed the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit were separate. Whereas, this one well-known writer, who's making an argument against Christianity, was saying that we worship the source through all the different faces of the different gods. We worship the source through all these different faces. I wish I could remember the writer's name, but it was enough of a thing that that this writer is prevalent in history. And there's a lot of other things thrown at the Christians, but it was interesting that the tag of polytheism was thrown back at Christianity at that time before it was really a thing, because he was saying that we worship the source, the one united whole that we're all a part of through the different faces of the gods. So the segmentation of God, in a way, getting back to my point, actually helps you connect to the grander source better. So if you attach a spirit behind, let's say, a spirit of the house or a protective spirit of the house, maybe it's not the house itself, or maybe it is the house itself, or maybe it's a spirit of transportation, the car, or maybe it's the car itself. It could be either one. If you attach one to Mother Nature, I call Mother Nature Jorah. That's my own term. Yorn is a more Nordic term. I say Jorah. I like calling Mother Nature Jorah. I've decided to use that term, and I'm referring to Mother Nature, mainly the nature in the form of the forest, when I use the term Jorah. But if I have that, and I have a connection to the spirit of my house, I make a little offerings to it, I speak to it. Doesn't have to be anything big, just a candle here or there, a little offering here or there, a form of verbal acknowledgement. I'm connecting to everything better. Does that make sense? So let's say that you say God made everything, or let's just say everything's a part of God. You start to kind of lose a way to relate to the source. Because the source, if the source is everything, or even worse, if it's completely separate and everything was created by it, then your relation is never immediate. Your relation to God is never immediate. It's always either far away or all together. And if it's all together, then it's hard to appreciate the little tiny pieces of God, or the whole. The little tiny pieces that make up our life, that make up everything. If I worship nature, if I go out and worship nature and I have these little rituals, or if I'm being a little bit demeaning myself when I call them little rituals, or if I have little rituals relate to different spirits or different gods, if I grab my Thor's hammer and call out to Thor for strength, or thank him for the rain, I'm actually relating to the tiny pieces of God that mean something to me, making a grander connection to my heart that eventually adds up to a grander connection to the whole, because you're appreciating every little piece of the grander whole, or God with a capital G. If I have all these little rituals, now, keep in mind, rituals have their limits, sure. But so does everything. This is Maya. I hear rituals explained away a lot, but then what are you doing instead? How are you relating to God instead? What are you might have these other things I do, you might pray, things like that. But how do you relate to the little pieces of God that are a part of your life? That the ground that you walk on, the water that you drink, the protection, perhaps, that God offers, the strength, Thor. Or perhaps the motherly side of God. That's why a lot of people like to refer to God as the feminine. They feel a grander connection with the heart to God when they go through the feminine. It's another face. All these little pieces respected through all these little rituals, all these little understandings, and all these little loves creates a more coherent and constant connection to God with a big G. I hope that makes sense. Animism, I think, is misunderstood in the sense that it's thought to be tribal and ancient. It's thought to be a lesser form of polytheism, I think, sometimes. And polytheism is looked down upon by monotheism to be a misunderstanding of natural occurrences that were created by God, or an attachment of personality and value to the creation instead of the creator. And that's a whole nother argument. Did God become everything, or did God create separately? And if ultimately God was the only thing originally, then everything is still a piece of God. It's just segmented. So all the all the little, the tying of threads, the saying of mantras to different gods, the many different gods of Hinduism, for instance, the pujas, the lighting of the ghee, the lighting of candles, or in Vodou, the making of veves, honoring different spirits, different aspects of the source still, but very active in our lives, very immediate. Making the veves in Vodou, or really even working with saints, even in Christianity. So that's why a lot of people are drawn to saints, and they don't know why, because it feels closer, because saints are closer than God, aren't they? Isn't the spirit of this room closer to me than the Godhead? And now, granted, everything is connected, so it's still a part of the Godhead, but it's closer. So in animism, working with that which is close and working in ritualistic ways can actually lead to a grander connection to the source and a greater appreciation and love for God, capital G. I hope that was interesting. That's kind of leading to my main point. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, shoot them down in the comment section below on YouTube. I hope this didn't go too long. If you like this video at all, hit that thumbs up down there. It really helps out the channel. If you would like to share this video, feel free to share it wherever. As long as you give me credit, I don't care. Thank you very much. May the gods and spirits be with you, and have a wonderful day.